Parsha starts off, Ve'ela ha-mishpatim asher tasam afneim. These are the mishpat, the laws that you should place before them. Torah goes into many of the mishpatim and rules that we have in our halachic system. So Rashi brings from the Gemara in Gittin, asher tasam afneim lo afnei avdei alivim, that the Torah here is giving us in Isser that to appear before a non-Jewish court. That the mishpat should be before the Bezdin, it shouldn't be before the Ovdei Elilim. Even if you know that they judge in this case the same way that we do, you shouldn't bring stuff into their courts. Person brings stuff into their courts, says Rashi from the Gemara, it's Mechal es Hashem, see this from the Medrash, Umiyak Hashem Halilim Mahashpicha. Shneim Arlochin Serinat Suram, Vayvena Pelilim. Kashayvena Pelilim, Zeu Edus L'ila Yerasam. When you're uplifting our enemies by bringing stuff into their courts, it's a tremendous chil Hashem, and it's showing value to their value system over ours. And even when their system is not based on avodah zarah, like I assume today it's probably a quasi Judeo-Christian system, at the end of the day, you're showing that you think that their value system is better than ours, and their courts will come to a better decision than ours. Even if that's not your intent, even if you have other intents, but that's what you're showing with your action. You're showing that you think that they have a superior court system. There are cases where things are mutter to be brought before Gaisha courts. Small First Shlita has some nice shiurim about it that you can find on psak.org. But there's this Isser D'Oraisi here of bringing cases before Arkos, that they have to be brought before a Bezdin. Interesting, Rabbi first quotes that this Isser applies also to Jewish secular courts that are not run al pi the Torah. He quoted the Chazon Ish, Rav Adia Yosef, that it could be even worse than a Goyish court to bring before such a court. The Rambam in Hilchos Sanhedrin writes very strongly about it. A person judges in their courts, the Dinei Yakom, even if they get the law right, he's a Rasha and his Kiyuchir Figide Faharim Yad B'Tos Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a certain rebellion against our Torah. Goes on and continues that there are times when the Goyish court is strong enough to execute the law and the Jewish court is not, and he goes before a Jewish court, and then he might have a heter sometimes to come before the non-Jewish court. There's this aspect of the Chil Hashem of showing value to a foreign system more than ours. Sometimes people might have ethics questions and questions in different areas of values, and there are Goyish thought processes and systems for morals. And I'm not saying a person can't look at them, but for a person to think that that's more than ours is in itself a chil Hashem, I suppose. And it's probably also to think that they're actually better than ours probably just means a person hasn't explored ours well enough on the topic he's exploring. Rabbeinu Bachai comes at this from two directions, and he explores in the beginning of the parsha how this could be even worse than murder to come before a Goyish court in a certain sense. He says, because this is an Aveira, which is severe like many Aveiros, because it has many branches, and it has outgrowths which lead to many, many more Aveiros. He says, we know that murder is from the most severe Aveiros, from the most severe punishments. Ma'abed nefesh achas mi-Yisrael is kibu obed an olam moe. A person wipes out a life, sorry, not from Yisrael, a person's ma'abed nefesh achas min olam, he's wiping out not just that person, but all the potential from that person. His person could have had children, grandchildren. The whole world started from one person. So he's wiping out an entire world. When he saves a life, he's like Mekayim and Olamo. He's saving an entire world. Just to appreciate the severity of what it means to take a life. And at the same time, he says, the Avon of Gezel and Chil Hashem that comes about through going to such a court could be even worse in a certain sense. Why? Because murder a person could do tshuva for. A person is able to get repentance for murder, the way that Cain did. He says tshuva doesn't help until you actually return the stolen item. So if you never return the stolen item, you'll end up worse off in a certain sense because you'll never have dealt with the sin. Versus murder, you could do tshuva, you could deal with the sin. And Chil Hashem also, we know it's tremendously difficult to do tshuva. We know that tshuva and Yom Kippur and Yisurin could deal with it to some degree, but the only way to be mechaper for it is with misa. There's no way for a person to deal with his aveira in one's lifetime. So these aveiros, he says, are both included here when a person goes to Arkos. There's the Chil Hashem aspect, which we spoke about, that he's making Oivenu Pelilim, he's giving strength to their system, he's like building up the avodah zaras that their legal system are based on. And there's a gezel aspect too, because when a person judges in their courts, he says the money that they give him is gezel gamor. I think the pshat is, Rabbi first said, that halachically their din is not din, it's not binding, meaning that it doesn't, meaning even if you would go to a bezdin and they would give you the money, but you go to a goyish court without a heter and they give you the money, it's not really your money because their psak is not halachically valid. And a person will never come to, and Rabbeinu B'chai explains, a person will never do tshuva on such gazel, and therefore he'll never have mechila. So it comes out ritzich as much as it's a much worse aveira, but at least he'll hopefully come to tshuva someday. But the gazel and the chil Hashem from going to such a court, so the chil Hashem is very difficult to deal with, and the gazel he probably will never do tshuva on. So it's just a fascinating thing Rabbeinu B'chai is setting up, that you have a tremendous aveira, and you have an aveira which comparatively, in a certain sense, is a smaller aveira, but if a person does tshuva on one and he'll never do tshuva on the other, so he comes off much worse off because of the fact that he has this aveira still here and he's not going to deal with it. Chazal say, Hurhuri aveira kasha me aveira, that in the element of Aveiros, that it could be that a person's thinking about the aveira could be even worse than going and actually doing the aveira. Difficult chazal to understand, but I think the pshat is that when a person goes and he does the aveira, that he realizes, I think the way they explain it, then he knows he has to do tshuva. Person sits in his room and he thinks about things, he wipes that off, that's not an aveira. He's not going to come to do tshuva on it. And in that sense, he'll come to do it more, and he'll come to keep it on his record, and it'll end up that it could be a much bigger, it could be much worse in a certain sense. There's actually a fascinating Rav Tzadok Cohen in the Pri Tzadik in B'Shalach, where he takes this in a surprising direction, this concept. This is Gemara in Yevamis, Daf Lamed Vavam at Beis. Confusing Gemara. The Gemara is talking about a case of a woman who was married to a Kohen and then develops a certain need for chalitza, and whether or not there's room to be lenient, because chalitza would force her to end up divorcing her husband. And there's a machlokas from Misharshia and Ravina about it. And Rav Misharshia was not happy with Ravina's psak, and he said, "Hey Rava, the tishrei tarba. May you come to matter forbidden foods. May you come to matter much worse than this." Very confusing line to understand why he would say it. And Rav Tzadok talks about the idea that the Yetzer Hara has the ability to put us in a certain darkness, that we think what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right. As Mrs. Sharm talks about at length, that's that type of darkness to make us see things. And so a person could do Aveiros and think he's a righteous person. He'll never come to do tshuva on it. And that was what Rameshar Shia was worried about, that Ravina, you're mattering something forbidden, and you'll never see your error in your ways. If you come to do worse, though, then you'll realize that, then you'll see an Aveira, and you'll say, how did I get here? Because Aveira Goreris Aveira, it must have been brought here from somewhere. And you'll realize, it must have been that I made a mistake in the first place. It is due to greater introspection to realize that you must have stumbled further. And you must have started stumbling much earlier than you realized. Quotes that pshat in a pasuk by David, where David HaMelech says, Tenu avon al avona. May you come to realize your mistake is what he means. But if you do worse, then you'll end up realizing, when you see that you're at the bottom, you realize that you must have done more Aveiros on the top. It's an interesting piece. He's talking about the Mishnah that mitzvah goreres mitzvah, aveira goreres aveira, shachar mitzvah mitzvah, schar aveira aveira, that we have in Perkei Avos. And Tosas Yom Tov explains this is a big basic difference between schar mitzvah mitzvah, that mitzvahs Hashem is habalatayar misayinos, so Hashem helps you do more mitzvahs. Habalatami pochsin, while a person comes to Aveiros, Hashem opens the path for him. Hashem doesn't help him do more Aveiros. That's not how the system works. So what's pshat in this Mishnah? Schar aveira aveira, maybe it's something in this direction, that there could sometimes be a schar aveira for an aveira. It could be beneficial to him that he ends up doing Aveiros. It'll help him to do tshuva. It'll help him look at how did I get here and end up doing tshuva on the previous thing. Just a perspective from Rabbeinu B'chai on what it means to keep an Aveira in the bag, what it means not to be introspective enough to find our Aveiros and come to do tshuva on them. Perspective on what it means to Chil Hashem, to value other systems more than our own in areas like this where we have the answers. We may be able to see truth and pursue truth and go in the proper path. Have a good Shabbos.